Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Will Muschamp with the midweek press conference today. Gamecocks getting ready for Georgia over in Athens. Coming up 3:30 kickoff Saturday. It'll be on CBS, national TV ball game, and a huge ball game in the SEC East. Emerson Phillips joined by Gamecock Central staff writer Collyn Taylor. And Collyn, I would say, by far the biggest game of the year in the SEC East with Georgia 8-0, Carolina 6-2.
Right, and this is one of the biggest games. You still have Georgia, Kentucky looming a couple weeks down the road, but this is probably the biggest game South Carolina's played in a few years. It's the biggest game under Will Muschamp since he arrived, and South Carolina. This has big implications of obviously the SEC East, but this is a measuring stick game for them to see how far they've come in just roughly a year and a half under Will Muschamp. So. Obviously, not only a huge game for South Carolina, but for the East, and the Gamecocks are treating it as such. They seem pretty focused from what we saw today.
Yeah, just a short, brief press conference today, only about 15 minutes, shortest midweek presser of the year for Will Muschamp, and he opened, Collyn, by saying that Georgia is an explosive football team that's been dominant this year.
Yeah, and Georgia, obviously with them, they have Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, two running backs that probably should be playing on Sundays right now, but opted to come back and, play for Georgia one more year, and it's paying off. This team's ranked in every poll, they're ranked at least in the top 4. They're probably going to be number 1 or number 2 in the college football playoff poll this week. And they're a team that knows what it's about. They like to run the ball. They like to run, line up, I formation, single back, and run down your throat, and if you stop us, you stop us. And so far, no one's been able to stop them. So they're a team that loves to run the ball, and South Carolina knows that, and that's obviously a big point for them to stop in the run this week.
Collyn, like a lot of Gamecock fans, I've seen Georgia play a little bit this year. Haven't seen every play of every game, but I was a little bit surprised to learn Muschamp said that Georgia's got over 80 plays of 10 yards or more this year, and that's what he was talking about when he said they're explosive.
Yeah, and they have the ability to get on the perimeter, and that's where a lot of those runs come from, is, getting the ball out there with Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. A lot of it happens in the run game, and those guys just getting to the second level and, turning on the jets. And, Georgia's offensive line is one of the best in not only the East, but in the conference. They're able to kind of open up holes on the defensive front and let the running backs make plays at, in the second level. So that's a big thing South Carolina's going to have to look out for, is making sure those linebackers stay off block. The defensive line kind of eats up those five-man fronts, and then, that way it gives Sky Moore, TJ Brunson, Sherrod Green, and those guys more opportunities to go make plays.
Georgia opened as a 22.5-point favorite in this ball game. The line has since climbed to 24.5. Collyn, the betting public at least not giving the Gamecocks much of a chance in this ball game. What do you think?
It's a tough one. Georgia's obviously, they're boat racing team this year. I mean, they dismantled Florida, they dismantled Missouri. I mean, they're just absolutely on cruise control to the East right now. I think the line's probably what I expected. I expected somewhere around 20.5 points. Just because, Georgia has been so good, and South Carolina's, defensively, their identity is a bend but don't break and score points when they need to score points. I think it'll be a little bit closer than the spread indicates, just because I don't think South Carolina's facing any kind of real pressure right now, since they already clinched bowl eligibility. So I think it'll be closer, but I still think Georgia's talent-wise and team-wise just a little bit better than South Carolina at this moment.
Last year's game moved to Sunday at Williams-Brice due to hurricane last year, Collyn, and Georgia ran 50 times for 336 yards in that ball game. And Gamecock run defense has been improved this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what reason do we have to believe that the Gamecocks are going to be able to slow down Nick Chubb and Sony Michel and this vaunted Georgia running game?
Right. No team's been able to really do that this year, especially in the SEC. And I think you got to look at South Carolina's track record. I mean, they played a really good rushing team in Tennessee. And, aside from that first half, where John Kelly kind of gashed them a little bit, they adjusted to it. I think you got to look at South Carolina, they've been able to make adjustments in the second half that usually tend to favor, them defensively. So I think you got to hope that you hold Georgia, you bend but don't break, and you force them to kick field goals in the first half. That way you can get into the second half, make your adjustments, and make sure guys you're playing blocks up right. Because, if they don't and they kind of get, behind the eight ball a little bit, then it could be a really long day for South Carolina because Georgia's running attack is just so good.
Carolina ran the football well last week in the win over Vanderbilt. The Gamecocks have won 3 straight coming into this matchup. Collyn, at one point, Muschamp was asked about, the Gamecocks' success running the ball against Vandy, and he said that, Georgia will have seen everything that we did well against Vandy, and they're going to set their defense up. They're going to scheme to take away what we do well. So he said, very frankly, I'm not sure what we did well last week is going to help us this week.
Right. And, I think if there was ever a time for Will Muschamp and Kurt Roper to get creative and start dialing up some different kind of offensive sets and offensive runs and things like that, it's this week. You have nothing to lose. You've already clinched the bowl game. You have, 2 very, very winnable games on the schedule left. This is a time where, you run the reverses and the double passes and things like that to kind of get Georgia off of its game, because if they have to game plan for not knowing what you're going to do next, then you're able to run the ball a little bit more effectively because they're kind of on their heels a little bit. So I think you'll see a little bit more creativity from Will Muschamp or Kurt Roper this week, which should, if everything goes perfectly, lead to a better run game.
Collyn, Kurt Roper and the Gamecock staff have taken their share of criticism this year over play calling. I'm not sure how well-founded that is, but I know that has been the case, particularly after the Texas A&M loss several weeks ago. And, just on a personal note here, Collyn, watching the Vanderbilt game on Saturday, what we saw is design run plays for Jake Bentley. Bentley had run the ball very little this season prior to the Vanderbilt game, and it was not just him running. When the pocket broke down, Collyn, it was plays that were designed for him to run the football, and he ran for 55 yards in his first career TD. And it looked to me like the Gamecocks were trying to show a new wrinkle to give the remaining opponents on the 2017 schedule something to think about, and that is the run game presence of Jake Bentley.
Yeah, and I think, overall, the Vanderbilt game was probably the most complete game Kurt Roper's called. And I think, they wanted Jake to run the ball a little bit more, and doing that kind of brings the defense up a little bit. They can't drop 8 in coverage, and they can't key on the running back during those, read plays and inside zones. So I think it's a great wrinkle for South Carolina's offense, and I think if that continues, and it's something that they can kind of lean on. And plus, it opens up the RPO game a little bit more. It takes a little bit more pressure off Jake Bentley to pull the ball in those RPOs and pass. It lets kind of him know that his running game is going to be there, and worst comes to worst, he can scramble and make some plays with his feet as well if the pocket breaks down a little bit.
Collyn, we saw Bentley run the football at times last year. Why do you think the Gamecocks have waited till this late stage of the season to let him run this year?
I think it's just they see an opportunity as the teams are kind of collapsing when they run those inside zones. They're collapsing on A.J. Turner, Tyson Williams, whoever's in the backfield. And when the defense collapses like that, it usually opens up lanes for running on the other side of the field. And, A.J. Turner was very straightforward today. That when he pulls the ball like that, there's wide open grass in front of him. He's going to get 10 yards. So, when you're getting an automatic first down essentially every time you run the ball through Jake Bentley, that's pretty efficient running. And I think that's going to be something that, they might, look to implement more of as the season goes on for what's left of it.
Gamecock Central Radio, we're recapping today's Will Muschamp press conference here on Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with our staff writer, Collyn Taylor. And we hope you'll call the Gamecock Central hotline. We've set up this new phone line that allows you to call in and take part in our podcast. You can call in, leave a voicemail, leave your question about Gamecock football or about Georgia on the Gamecock Central hotline. That number is 803-497-9058. And Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell will answer your question on the game day edition of Gamecock Central Radio coming up this Saturday. So it's 803-497-9058, the GC hotline set up for you. Take advantage, get involved with the Gamecock Central Radio podcast. Collyn, Muschamp, no-nonsense guy. We've talked about this all year, but he has shown that he's got a sense of humor. Once or twice per press conference during the week, he will talk to members of the media in a lighthearted way last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, he talked about the haircut that the guy from the state newspaper had gotten that week, and that got a chuckle from the crowd and the media members that were gathered there. And today he talked about the sweater of one of the TV guys in the back of the room. Said he was wearing a new sweater today, and it looked nice, something like that. So we've enjoyed getting to know Muschamp, and I like the fact that, by and large, he's brass tacks, man. He's down to business, but he does have fun on occasion.
Yeah, he's a guy that you can kind of sense he's getting a little bit more comfortable
in
his role, kind of since job security is kind of settling down a little bit. Most people are definitely happy with the hire in terms of fans. Stuff's kind of on an upward trajectory. So he's kind of feels like he's got a little more wiggle room to kind of poke fun at the media.
Yeah.
And even today when he said that it's not Halloween, it's red zone and third down day. So he's a guy that likes to have fun. He's pretty sarcastic. Has some good wit about him. So it's good to see that kind of personality come out.
I'm glad you brought that up. I've got the soundbite here. I'm going to let you hear Will Muschamp. He was asked about what the Gamecocks did for Halloween, and I'm going to let you hear that in just a moment. But before we get to that, Collyn, Muschamp is a seasoned veteran, and that's another thing I've grown to appreciate about him. So many stops in the SEC as an assistant coach. Obviously, a longtime assistant under Mac Brown at Texas, and 4 years as the head coach at Florida. He's been around the block, man. He's seen just about everything in the SEC, and he was asked a couple of times, a couple of different questions today about things that I thought were off topic, had nothing to do with Gamecock football, and he avoided them very deftly, I thought. He was asked about Jim McElwain's firing at Florida, and Muschamp said, I don't want to comment on things that I don't know much about, and he just kind of left it at that. And later he was asked about the college football playoff rankings that are coming out. And he was asked if Georgia's a top 4 team in his opinion. And he said, I haven't given any thought to the college football playoff rankings because I'm worried about South Carolina and Georgia this week. And I just thought those were professional answers, Collyn, from a coach that just doesn't want to get involved. And, a lot of coaches may have an opinion that they'd like to share on some of these other topics. Muschamp doesn't get involved with all that.
No, he doesn't. And, he joked earlier in the season that, they have a pretty nice bunker that the coaches set up in during the season and got, where they do all their work. And, they really don't pay a lot of attention to the outside noise, the media coverage or anything like that. Because if they did, then it's easy to start thinking, well, we really don't have a shot against Georgia. Well, really this or that, or otherwise. It doesn't, doing that it doesn't bring you too low and it doesn't get you too high. It kind of keeps you right in the middle of things.
That's
I
right.
think he's learned that, from his time at Florida and different things like that.
Yeah. He went through some adversity at Florida, didn't he? And I think he learned from that experience, and he does stay pretty even-keeled. At least he seems to have been that way so far in his year and a half plus at South Carolina. He said several weeks ago in his midweek presser that he doesn't watch TV, he does not read the newspapers, he does not listen to the radio during football season. So he doesn't get caught up in a lot of this stuff that goes on during the week that really doesn't have a lot to do with X's and O's. So I appreciate that, and I tip my cap to him for that. Collyn, let's play the soundbite here from Muschamp. Remember a few weeks ago, Muschamp was asked, was practice set up differently because of the eclipse? And Muschamp, very deadpan, said no. He didn't even know anything about the eclipse, really, Collyn. So today he was asked by the same reporter, coincidentally, if the Gamecocks did anything fun for Halloween. And here's what he had to say.
No. What are you dressed up as?
Underpaid reporter, like
It's red zone and third down day. It's not Halloween. It's Tuesday.
No fun for Halloween for the Gamecocks, Collyn, practicing red zone and getting ready for Georgia.
Yeah, no, it's Will Muschamp lives his day by what they're doing at practice. It's you're not counting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's 3 days before game time, 2 days before game time, 1 day before game time. So that's how his calendar operates. And it's working out for him right now, at least. Gamecocks are 6-2, so if that keeps up, I think he's gonna keep counting down and not worrying about celebrating any holidays.
Yeah, it's not Halloween. It's Tuesday, Muschamp said. So, hey, we hope you take your kids out, have some fun for Halloween. Gamecock football, no trick-or-treating for the young men on the Gamecock football team. So, Collyn, thanks again for being with us today, man. Huge game coming up on Saturday. Gamecocks a 24.5-point dog. I don't know what to make of that, Collyn. I certainly didn't expect South Carolina to be I figured Georgia would be a double-digit favorite. I thought it might be 14 or 17. I'm a little bit surprised that it's as high as it is, and the public is on Georgia, so that number continues to grow. It'll be interesting to see if the Gamecocks have anything for the Dogs on Saturday.
Yeah, and, I think, the odds makers learned their lesson last week, making Florida a 14.5-point dog, and then Florida getting, bulldozed for, 42-7. So I think that they're going to tend to go higher for those Georgia lines from now on, here on out, just because Georgia has been able to boat race a few of the teams they've played.
That's a good point. Yeah, Georgia has not been involved in many close games this year. Just the one, really, at Notre Dame, where they won, early in the season, and in a tight ball game they won up in Notre Dame, but that's really the only competitive game that they've played all year. So, it'll be interesting to see if the Gamecocks can make a game out of it and force Georgia to try to win a fourth-quarter game. But the betting public certainly does not think this is going to be a fourth-quarter ball game. We'll find out coming up on Saturday. Collyn Taylor, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's staff writer Collyn Taylor, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us, friends.